That is a crate. It's an old crate practice amp that we just finished doing what I would consider calling it a total conversion. And what we did was replaced everything inside of the amplifier with battery circuitry. Initially, this crate se01ep10 amplifier, you would plug it into the wall and it would run on AC power. And now we have a battery pack. Today I've got just 6 cells loaded in it, and you have the option of running an additional 6 for a total of 12 lithium-ion 18650 cells. These batteries, they run about 4.2 volts. So with 6 of them, you get 24 volts DC. So there is a 10-inch, it's the original speaker, and I added the power pack. That plugs in here. And then here is an additional jack because there is a crossover that you can engage. You can run just the built-in speaker. If you want to run a modeler, you could choose to use the tweeter jack, plug a tweeter in, and then you just set this switch to the tweeter setting, and that's how that works. It is fused. There's a 5 amp fuse in there. Actually, I got to see what the value of that is, because it should be a 5. I find that with this particular amp board, if I don't put a 5 in it, they blow anything lower. So we cleaned this up. It looks like this board got installed a little crooked. I didn't notice that, but we did varnish this the strip of wood that crate hung onto. I gutted the electronics. The original circuitry was all removed, and these knobs here, I remember picking these out of the catalog online at tata.com, and I said to my wife, I think those knobs are going to look choice on this amp. And then I actually Googled the amp, and these are the same knobs that came with it. So that must have been my old pal J.C. Mitchell had one of these amps when he was a kid, before he got his much more powerful half-stack amplifier. He had a PV half-stack. He had this crate for a short time. And I remember I liked that crate. I liked the sound of it. And someone had gifted me this, and they said, well, the amp is basically a piece of shit. It's blown. Someone had worked on it it looks like it had been worked on a few times. So I basically gutted it, and we threw the chassis into the utility sink and scrubbed it down. Comet and a scrubby, like a toilet bowl scrubber. And once we got it all clean, I sanded this down, shot it with some primer, and there was some additional holes that needed to be. I had some small sheet metal panels, and I would use JB Weld Automotive epoxy and attach those to spots in here where I didn't want to have as many holes for my control layout, so I had to patch some stuff up. And this was a much bigger slot. They had rectangular slots on the front because there was rectangular switches, like waffle switches, and those were mounted to the PCB, which my design was completely different. So I did some patching, and there is 2 LEDs because there's 2 circuits. Basically, the 24 volts leaves the power pack and comes up through this cable, and there's a jack here on the bottom of the amp where you plug that in. Immediately goes through the fuse to the switch, and when it comes out of the power switch, it goes to a step down transformer. So actually it splits. So 24 volts goes to the power amp circuit, and then the other end of that split goes to a voltage regulator. It's what you could think of it as. It's a step down. It's a buck transformer, they call it. So this just, you put 24 volts in, you get 9 volts out. So there is a buffer circuit that is right on the input, and the buffer makes sure that if you're going to run pedals or a long cable, you don't have any tone suck. It keeps your tone true, honest tone, no matter what. So there's a JFET buffer, and then there is the master volume for the power amp. There is the gain for the preamp circuit, and then bass, mid-range, treble, and then this is a shape switch for your upper mid-range, and it like shifts it. It's basically like a bright switch, and this amp is bright. It's a bright amp. Now, if you want to use a tweeter, there is generous an extra jack for a tweeter. You can plug your tweeter into this port here and throw the toggle over, because the way that it's two options on this switch. If the toggle is pointing inward, you're just going through the built-in speaker. If you want to go out of the tweeter jack, you throw the toggle over, and then you're able to plug in a tweeter. And it takes the crossover out of the circuitry. So you have the optional crossover, the option to run a tweeter, and the idea behind that is to use it as just as a powered speaker with a modeling device. Right now, as it is, I mean, I had tested this before I built it, because I have everything that's in this orange part, I have it in a smaller box. I had built this preamp and the power amp into a real small chassis, and I had used that quite a bit, and I really like the way that sounds. The circuit is the guys who invented that circuit, it's a place called Runoff Groove, ROG, and they're a staple of the do-it-yourself kind of amp in a box, like emulating famous amplifier circuits through JFET topology. That's really what those guys do, and they do it really well, and they did it a long time ago. So yeah, the Runoff Groove tone mender is the second part of the tone. Like I said, you come in, you go through a buffer, and then it goes to the tone mender EQ, and out of that we go to the power amp, and that power amp has a master volume control. The power amp is a TDA3116D2 Class D 100 watt mono power amp board. Now, running it in this configuration, the maximum it would put out would be 50 watts. If I wanted to goose this up to 100, I would have to run a 4 ohm load, and this is an 8 ohm load. So it is what it is, and this isn't supposed to be 100 watt, and I would probably blow the speaker. The speaker did have to get patched, and I probably will if I let myself go crazy with the volume on this, because this speaker is probably rated for 15 watts. So that's something to keep in mind. Is don't pretend I'm Ted Nugent, but this it came out looking fairly good. There were some bumps in the road. The first amp board that we installed blew up immediately, and it was no fault of. I mean, when the replacement came in, I wired it in, and it's absolutely fine. So I have no idea what that was all about, and that's happened 3 times now with these Chinese amp boards. And when I talk about my experience with these, it's not limited. I've been playing with these amp boards a lot for a long time, since like 2008 was probably when I first got into it. So yeah, we had that little bump in the road there, and then looking today when I went to wrap it up and mount everything, there were a couple of spring clips that slide over these holes in the front up top of the chassis for you to run these fasteners through the top, and I didn't have them. So I found some spring clips that were slightly different, and with that I did have to bore. I had to use a Forstner bit and bore out about a 1/2 inch port, about 3/4 of an inch deep on both sides. So it has these two ugly, I more than likely what I'll do is find something to jam in there. Little rubber cork of that diameter would be great. But it is what it is, and I'm not going to fret it. The corners have been removed. I don't know if I did that when I was gifted this. And I ripped them off to put them on something else, and they're not on any of my stuff here. So if I run into those, they're going back on. And if you have a crate and it's not doing anything, take those off and mail them to me. I replaced the rubber feet today, so it's got brand new rubber feet. And like I said, I know what this sounds like. You don't have to run it off the battery pack. You can take anything that's over 12 volts and plug it into this port, and it'll run just fine. So you could take a 24 volt 5 amp laptop type power supply and plug that into this, and you wouldn't have to run batteries. But really the idea is I've been recycling these lithium ion batteries for so long, I could keep it loaded up with 12 of them and it wouldn't put a dent in my inventory. I've got a lot of 18650 batteries. We're talking 100. So just the idea of having a guitar amp that sounds good. I mean, that you got to understand, it's like almost 2 o'clock here, so I couldn't do a demo. I got this. I've never had a tube screamer, and they had a sale at Beringer, or Sweetwater had a sale, and I treated myself and bought myself a tube screamer. I've been thinking about getting a Timmy, and maybe I'll build that at some point, but if I can, I found out there's a K-Line Blue Sky that's, I think it's $26. So I very well may just purchase that rather than spending what I would spend to build a pedal and having to build it, considering my luck lately has been so horrid. But yeah, I'm into overdrives. That's been my thing. And I find that I'm able to run those in accompaniment of my modeling. I use a new XMG30, so putting an overdrive in front of it or in the effects loop is very effective. But I replaced the LED because it came with a red one, and I put the blue one in last night. And I tried this tube screamer on this amp, and it fucking sounded phenomenal. Like, now I know why people love tube screamers. I played a tube screamer at J.C. Mitchell's house when I was a kid. This guy, Mike Rolla, he had a Washburn Eagle guitar in a factory hard case, and he had not the first one, but the second one, the second issue tube screamer. And he had that in his case, and I remember I hated it because at the time the only distortion that I knew was a Big Muff, and I was like, this thing doesn't distort at all. But I tried it today, and now I know why people love these things. And that's not to say this amp needs an overdrive. It sounds fantastic clean. It really does sound great, and I know what it sounds like running the modeler through it. So. And having the option to have the tweeter, that's kind of really important for me, because when you're doing amp modeling, you need that full range idea. So this is this is like my amp. This is mine. I'm so proud of myself that I had the common sense to eventually realize what I had, which was the whole thing. I had everything, I mean, when I got it, I tore it apart. I had the orange piece. I had this. It was in a milk crate. and this was separate, you know. And I mean, I had run it. There were some remotes that we did where this was the only guitar speaker, and because it sounded so good. Now the speaker does have damage. There was a couple of pokies. There's one here, and there was some tearing down here. So I painted that with Elmer's glue and put toilet paper on it and fixed that up. So probably more than likely the first thing that I'm going to run into is the speaker's going to fail. But yeah, I'm going to be looking for these. I'm sure you could do it on a Fender. You could do the same thing on a little Fender practice amp. But there's something about these crates that have much more mystique to them. They're just older. So yeah, if anybody has any old crate amp, and instead of doing the Patreon thing, just mail it to me. Or if you can't, you don't want to pay the shipping, let me know. I'll cover the shipping on it, because that's what I would like to do, is get another one of these. If I could get another one and do the same mod, then I could have stereo, and I would have the matching crate speakers, so it would sound identical, and that would be like, that would be sweet. So I'll be back with a more significant sound demo where we plug this into a modeling device, and I can demo the tweeter for you, so you can look forward to that. And in the meantime, hug your pets, try to stay warm, and peace.